I ran a simulation of the 3-point dolly that drives the house edge down to a tiny 0.066%. That means the house keeps only 66 cents out of every $100,000 bet. When you play this strategy, you'll be making some of the most favorable bets on the craps table, and that's what drives the house edge to almost zero. But here's the thing, it doesn't matter if you drive the house edge to zero. What matters is how often you win and how much money you get to take home. I'm Matt, and I love running craps simulations. I ran this strategy a million times to find out how often you could win, how much you might win, and how this strategy looks from the casino's point of view. We're going to deep dive into the output of the simulation in 3 parts. First, we'll look at the results on a per shooter basis. Second, we'll see how our players fared over a session of 10 consecutive shooters. And third, we'll examine this from the casino's perspective, evaluating the house take and its edge. As a bonus, I'll run a second simulation where the players actively limit their losses, and we'll see how that changes the results. Let's jump in. On a per shooter basis, the 3-point dolly wins more often than it loses, and it's not even close. It's about a 2-to-1 advantage. Now, what do I mean by a shooter? A shooter in craps holds the dice until they 7 out. They throw a come out roll, set a point, maybe even multiple points, and then eventually they'll roll a 7 and pass the dice to the next shooter. This chart shows how long our shooters held the dice. On average, a shooter will roll the dice 8.5 times before they 7 out, but the median is lower, only 6 rolls. The minimum is just 2 rolls. Those shooters set a point on their first roll and immediately rolled a 7. The shooter who held the dice longest rolled 88 times, but that's not typical. These bars show the central tendency. The middle 50%, which is between the 25th and 75th percentiles, rolled between 4 and 11 times, and the middle 90% rolled between 2 and 22 times. Here is the histogram of the amounts won or lost during a single shooter. The data covers 1 million shooters. The median is $1,000 won. In other words, 50% of the time the players won $1,000 or more on a single shooter. The most any player won was just over $5,000. The middle 50% is between a loss of $890 to a win of $2,000. And the middle 90% of players covers losses between just about $6,000 to wins of about $3,000. Now you may be noticing that this distribution is lopsided. The scale of the losses is larger than the wins, even though there are numerically more wins than losses. This becomes evident when we zoom out. The most any player lost for a single shooter was over $41,000. What's going on here? These big losses happen when shooters are making lots of points. Each point they make knocks those bets off, and that can be expensive because our simulated players are betting against the shooters. They're essentially betting that they're gonna 7 out. So let's take a quick look at how that works, and then we'll get into part 2, where we'll see what happens when we play through multiple shooters. The aim of the 3-point dolly is to make a don't pass and don't come bets that cover 3 numbers. We'll also increase the potential wins by laying odds that will return 100 times our line bets. You won't find many casinos that accept this level of play, but if you do, you should know what to expect. We're at a $10 table, so on the come out roll, let's put $10 on the don't pass. This wins even money on a 2 or 3, loses on a 7 or 11, pushes on a 12, and anything else sets the point. We lose on the 11, so let's replace it. And we lose again on that come out 7. Okay, now the shooter has set their point. It's going to be 4, and it's time to lay the odds. We want to win 100 times the line bet. So to win $1,000, we need to lay $2,000. And that's because laying odds on the 4 or 10 pays 1 to 2. We're actually laying more money to win less. But remember, we win on a 7, and that's twice as likely to roll as the 4. We'll also make a don't come bet for $10. And the shooter 7's out. We lose the $10 on the don't come bet, but we win the don't pass and its odds for an overall win of $1,000. Our first shooter is finished and only set a single point, but we're playing the 3-point dolly, so let's see if the next shooter can get set up on all 3 numbers. This time the point is an 8, and we lay our odds of $1,200. The don't come is going to move behind the 6, and we'll lay odds on that. The don't come moves to the 4, and we now have our 3 points. Notice we have $4,430 bet on the table now. If a 4, 6, or 8 rolls, we would lose that individual bet, but the other 2 would remain and the shooter keeps rolling. But that's not happening right now. The shooter 7's out, and that means all 3 bets win. Everything comes down, and we have a nice healthy bankroll that's up over $4,000. When you play the dark side on a 7 out, you have a whole bunch of bets that are winning at the same time. It's definitely a little bit of a different feeling than you might have when you're playing on the light side. We just saw 2 shooters, but the thing is, most of us don't play for just 1 or 2 shooters. We play for a session. So if we play for longer, what does that do to our win rate, and what happens to our profits? Now we're looking at results from 100,000 sessions of 10 consecutive shooters. The simulated players are still winning more often than they lose, but the gap is closing. Now it's a 55% win rate versus a 45% lose rate, and the amounts won or lost are completely amplified. There are still a lot of winners, but they're offset by rare but massive losses. The median is still over $1,000 won. The middle 50% is $5,800 lost to $7,000 won. And the range of the middle 90% starts to really show that skewed distribution again. $18,000 lost to almost $14,000 won. The most won is almost $25,000, but look at the most lost, over 75 grand. That's crazy, right? Those shooters just kept hitting their points and knocking out those don't pass and don't come bets, and the player just kept replacing them. If you want to see that play out, you can watch replays of the best and worst sessions on my Patreon or YouTube channel. Let's take a quick peek at the casino's books and see what they might think of the 3-point dolly. Our simulated casino saw a total bet of over $6 billion, with $2.4 billion won by the players and another $2.4 billion lost by the players and won by the casino. The difference between those is a house take of just $4 million, and that's a minuscule house edge of 0.066%. That's a profit for the casino of just 66 cents out of every $100,000 bet. So we know the house always wins, but they won't be winning very much if they allow 100 times odds and players with massive bankrolls take them up on it. Now, I do have to remind you that this is not the theoretical value that a mathematician might derive, but this is good enough for our purposes. You probably don't have the bankroll to keep laying all those odds on a hot shooter, so as a bonus, I ran a second simulation where I limited the potential losses to $10,000. We still have more winners than losers, but just barely. It's now 50.4% versus 49.6%, with just 36 out of 100,000 sessions breaking even. Since more than 50% are winning, we know that the median amount won will be positive, and it's $130. The most won is still around $25,000, but what's most striking is this huge bump at $10,000 lost. Over 28% of the players are in that bin, and of course, the most any player lost was exactly $10,000. By simulating the 3-point dolly, we learned that this strategy is more likely to win than lose. But when you lose more money than you might win. The house edge can be driven to near zero, but that does come with some real risk. And stop losses limit the worst case, but they also reduce the frequency of wins. And here's the question of the day. Do you prefer the frequent wins even if it means risking a substantial loss? Let me know in the comments below. You may have noticed that I skipped over some of the charts that I usually include in the videos. I've added these to a download on dicedata.info. It's absolutely free, so please go ahead and download it if you're interested in those statistics. Thanks for watching, and good luck at the tables.